Please, and we have, speaking for Proposition X, Supervisor Jane Kim. Speaking against Proposition X, Tim Colen, who is on the No on X campaign.
Hi, I'm Kim Line. I've been a reporter for a long time on the tech industry here. I'm a Barry native. Family's been here for 3 generations, and originally I was covering startup stuff, and then, you know, everything just seems sort of insane. Every subsequent economic cycle we have. I think she represents probably what I think is the most challenging district in San Francisco to represent. District 6. Which is SOMA and the Tenderloin. It's got all of the new development and a lot of the new jobs, and also a lot of kind of our lowest income San Franciscans. And I think you told the New York Times that representing your district is like having a case of whiplash.
No, I did not say that. Actually, my campaign manager at the time, Sunny Angulo, in 2010, we used to go back and forth between lines like Glide and St. Anthony's, and the next morning we'd be at Blue Bottle and 4 Barrel handing out our literature, and she said that felt like whiplash.
Okay. Well, and then we also have Tim Colen from the Housing Action Coalition, which is a pro-housing advocacy group that was founded, I think, in the 1990s, and it's made of both market rate and affordable housing. So I'm going to read Preserving Space for Neighborhood Arts, Small Businesses,
Absolutely true.
and
Working with them for
services
years.
in certain neighborhoods. And the question it's asking
Great, we can debate it
is, shall
afterwards.
the city require developers of projects in parts of the Mission and the South of Market neighborhoods to build replacement space if they remove production, distribution, and repair uses of 5,000 square feet or more, institutional community uses of 2,500 square feet or more, or arts activities uses of any size, and to obtain a conditional use authorization before changing the property's use. And we're going to have statements from both sides. So, Jane, you want to start off?
Sure. Thank you, Kim. Thank you for moderating, and I also want to thank our commissioner, Enrique Londa, for coordinating this event. I am so impressed by the turnout, so thank you all for being here and being engaged on one of the most important functions that San Francisco gets to help determine, which is land use controls. And Kim said it, I represent a district that is absorbing currently 80% of all of San Francisco's development. I represent 1/11 of the city, and 80% of all of the new commercial and residential development you're seeing is taking place in the district that I represent. So you can imagine that quite a bit of my time is spent on land use. Now, one of the most important things I've realized about land use and our planning document is that it is the document that represents what we as a city believes represents a healthy city. So how much housing do we build? And where, in what neighborhoods? How much of it is affordable and middle income? How much hotel? How much office space? And also how much PDR? Because if you only build office, which is more profitable, you're not creating land areas that's dedicated for jobs that are repair, manufacturing, etc., which create living wage jobs for people that often don't have a college degree or don't need a college degree. How much open space, pedestrian safety improvements, etc. So this planning department document is a reflection of what we believe a healthy and balanced city looks like, and that is what Proposition X is. We started discussions for Proposition X about a year and a half ago when we realized that we were rapidly losing arts organizations in the South of Market and in the Mission. At the time, Soma Studios was getting evicted, and South Space had just received notice of eviction. And so we started convening arts stakeholder and saying, yes, we need to fight for more funding for arts. That was one prong that we approached. But we also need to figure out, well, how do we preserve PBR and arts zoning that we were rapidly losing here in San Francisco, particularly in the South of Market and the Mission. Over the process of a year and a half, the legislation evolved to what you see today, Proposition X, that is before you today. Over the last 5 years, we've lost 970,000 square foot of PDR here in the South of Market, Mission, Potrero Hill, and Dogpatch. And if you combine total of everything that is in the pipeline today being considered by the planning department, and all of that gets approved as is, we will lose another 1.7 million square feet of PDR here in the city. And so what Proposition X is it's a measure that says we need to slow this down because we believe that this use is incredibly important. One, because we believe in a diverse city, and PDR is a part of that. But two, we also want to protect those jobs, your auto repair shop, your elevator repair, shipping, but also arts, because arts is frequently in PDR spaces. And we want to make sure that as development moves forward, that we require developers to replace a portion of that back in their new development. So we keep that in place. And so that is essentially what it is about. It's currently supported by many of our arts organizations like ArtsFan, the Democratic Party, Sierra Club Tenants Union, and the San Francisco Examiner.
Thank you, Dennis and Enrique. You do the city proud. And before I start my time, I'd like to express my appreciation for Jane. Jane, what you did on the Brisbane Baylands project, elevating that to the importance it really deserves, was a huge service to housing in San Francisco, and more importantly, to housing in the Bay Area. She did something really remarkable, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. So, I'm going to confess, my perspective is straight out on housing and the unprecedented housing affordability and displacement crisis. You don't need me to tell you about it, but I'll reduce it to its simplest terms to us. San Francisco has not in the past, and is barely now, we're having a good year, building the amount of housing at the velocity we need to accommodate a rapidly growing city, a city that's growing as quickly as San Francisco is. Now, I love motherhood and apple pie just as much as the next person, and when you say we should protect space for artists and makers and nonprofits, is there a person in the room that would disagree with that? I sure as hell wouldn't. That's a worthy goal. It's just until you get into what this actually proposes to do that it sort of is, it's alarming for a city that's having as difficult a time with housing as we are. And we cannot get our arms around this housing problem if we don't build more housing. So, I guess the first thing I would observe is, Jane, if you could get 7 signatures to get this on the ballot, why on earth wouldn't you do it as legislation instead? Where you, the voters, are being asked to make complex land use decisions on which I'm not sure if you're experts, instead of throwing it into the political cauldron of politics, and we'll decide land use, complex land use issues in the political arena. Second thing, as I said, there's some complex PDR replacement schemes in this legislation, and there has been no analysis done of them. They have not been analyzed as to their effects and to whether they would achieve the ends that PropX claims it's going to promote. Dennis, you work in this arena, you know this. You value analyses, you often ask the planning staff, I want some good data on this so I can make my decision. Has anyone done the analysis on it? We're not aware of it. Are these the right levels? Who knows? Hope you get it right, because if you don't, dear voters, it's locked in, and it can't be changed unless there's another vote. That's not a good way to make decisions about how land is used. Fundamentally, we disagree with the premise that we're losing PDR space at some alarming rate that's never been contemplated. That is not accurate, and it is not supported by the data. Planning department analyses, they put a lot of time and energy into this, and they show that the loss of PDR space so far is far below what the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, that's the governing plan that the Planning Commission adopted, the Board of Supervisors approved, and the mayor signed years ago. The Eastern Neighborhoods is the governing plan, and PDR space is entirely according to the projections of the plan. We've lost, that took all of the Eastern Neighborhoods, our former industrial land, and said, we were having a no shit moment and saying we need a lot of housing and we've got to start moving in that direction. And we took our industrial land and said a good part of it, we're going to zone it for different uses, including a lot of housing. We're going to retain a lot of it for PDR uses. And that was baked in. That's the city plan. But We've only, the whole Eastern Neighborhood Plan, we've lost 2 million out of the projected and planned 5 million feet. That's 50% of what was projected to be lost. We're right on schedule with it. And in the Mission, we've only lost 1/3 of what was expected by the plan through 2025. So I guess, this is the season for feverish, paranoid political fantasies. Mine would be that in spite of its wonderful, marvelous title, this is actually designed to restrict, impede, prevent building market rate housing in these neighborhoods, in the Mission and the neighborhoods of, Eastern neighborhoods. Wow, that is the wrong
So we gotta
direction
move on
to
to the
take.
questions, thank you. So the first question is for Jane. So Kate Sophus, who is the head of one of the more prominent urban manufacturing groups in the city, SF MADE, which is a group that this proposition is really meant to help, came out against it and said they weren't even really involved in the drafting of the law and they didn't know about it until a week before. And they say that the requirements are totally arbitrary. So why are you asking voters who don't really have the time or expertise to understand the technicalities of zoning to engage in a form of ballot box planning?
So, and thank you, because that also helps me address some of Tim's point. And since you started with a compliment, Tim, I have to say that I do enjoy debating with you on land use policies because I know you care about the issues, and we do agree sometimes as well, more than just Brisbane, because we also know that building housing is incredibly important here in San Francisco. So in answer to the first question, why the ballot? I agree. I typically do not like to go to the ballot with land use measures. But the reason why we went to the ballot with land use measure is this: we couldn't get 8 votes. We had only 7. And we felt that this measure was going to get vetoed. And here comes then to the second reason why we're going to the voters. Voters know that we are not just losing our working class residents and our middle class residents. Our artists are getting evicted out of San Francisco. Our auto repair shop is getting evicted out of San Francisco. I don't need to even show you the data. You know, because you have lost many of these businesses in your neighborhoods. That is just known anecdotally. And by the way, the data shows that we lost 970,000 square foot of PDR over the last 5 years. Now, maybe some of it was planned for in Eastern neighborhoods, but we're saying that that actually doesn't work for us anymore. Maybe at one point we thought that what certain uses were of value over another, and now we're actually experiencing the loss of PDR and arts organization. The Arts Commission, while we were writing this legislation, did a survey of 600 artists among its cohorts. 70% said that they had either already been evicted, were in the process of being evicted, felt that eviction was imminent. 70% of the 600 artists that were surveyed by the Arts Commission said this. We are in an alarm. This is actually very urgent. We are quickly evicting everyone that we care about. We are evicting the very people that make San Francisco the city that we love. So this measure is urgent. Now, about land use ballot measure planning. I agree it's complicated. So we did put in a measure after we heard criticism from folks like Tim and Kate, and they said, hey, you have to go back to the voters if certain things don't work. We agreed. So we put in an amendment before we put this before you and said the Board of Supervisors can amend this measure, weaken it or strengthen it, as long as they have a 2/3 vote of the Board of Supervisors. And we also put another comment that Kate had made, which was actually great. She said, why can't you treat PDR replacement like you treat inclusionary affordable housing requirement? Which is currently, we allow you to do 3 things as a market rate developer. You can either build on site, you can build off-site, or you can pay an in-lieu fee. So we thought that was a great idea. We didn't have time to put it into the measure before you, but we actually put in another amendment saying that the Board of Supervisors would work on that as trailing legislation. So we will give developers into the future the option to build on-site, the replacement PDR, build the replacement PDR off-site, if that is more appropriate, or pay an in-lieu fee to the city. We'll collect that money, and one of the ideas that Kate said is we'll pull those fees together, and the city will build off-site PDR that we can make sure we manage the rent for, which is another major issue, is ensuring that rent is affordable to our manufacturing and arts organizations.
Okay, and now we go to Tim. So, more than a decade ago, we were also in a similar crisis, and that's sort of the origin of this particular zoning category that we're talking about. The concern is that the highest financial value use of land is basically going to be office or housing, and if the city government doesn't intervene to do something to protect other categories of space, we're going to end up, not only losing kind of the demographic diversity that the space represents, but also kind of the economic diversity of the city's economy based on the job base. So how alternatively do you propose protecting the kind of jobs that the space represents?
That's a great question, and there's actually a terrific model. It's very innovative, recently passed. There's a project next to the California College of Art, CCA, called 100 Hooper, and I agree with Jane. It's an inclusionary model that has something above office space that can pay pretty good freight that will subsidize ground floor space for PDR uses. Why on earth are we not rolling that out and deploying it, or at least investigating whether it can be used? I guess the amazement I have is that what she's saying is worthy. We're in agreement there. It's not about values, it's about the math. And folks, is 0.75 replacement in the UMU, is that the right level? 0.5 replacement in MUR, is that right? Is that going to achieve this? When I used to work as a geologist, those were called swags, scientific wild ass guesses. You don't know how to evaluate them. I think that what this could end up doing is, I would say, as a blunt one-size-fits-all policies could yield very small spaces. And
Do you feel
there's
that way
nothing.
about the buy right legislation?
Huh?
One tools?
Bring it on.
I was noting on that argument.
Blunt, but yeah, blunt and one size would be great. But is it going to achieve what you just said it would achieve? And folks, it doesn't. And I guess there's a model. Try 100 Hooper. There's no price mechanism in it that's going to create space affordable that is guaranteed to create space affordable to artists and nonprofits. We'll get into the PDR in a minute.
Okay. So for Jane, one kind of criticism that you could make of the city's general approach to addressing this kind of unprecedented affordable housing crisis is that every time we get deeper into it, we just tack on more fees and we make new housing more expensive and politically unpredictable to produce. So for example, San Francisco already has the highest impact fees in the country at $72,000 a unit, and then the Proposition C affordability requirements, the proposed 25% goal, the city controller said that would make new development unfeasible, and yet here is another requirement on top of that. And all of these things have, trade-offs, as you know, because you're a policymaker. If housing affordability is a major concern for you in your campaign, why are you pushing a proposition that will make us potentially sacrifice on that front?
So it's all about the balance again. I have been the biggest vibrant proponent for affordable housing, and that's just based on my record. You can look at the numbers, and I have fought for and won more affordable middle-income housing than any member of this board. But just as important as it is for us to build and protect housing for our working class and middle class residents, it's also just as important to protect working class and middle class jobs. You can't protect the housing and then not protect the jobs. They go hand in hand together. We want our San Francisco residents to thrive in the city, and that is by being able to work in the arts, to work in manufacturing, to work in repair, to be makers. We want to encourage that here in the city. We don't want to become a city of just office. Now, if we left land use up to the market, which is what some of my opponents will say is the right way to go about things, we will just be living in a city of market and luxury rate housing and office, because that is what commands the highest dollar per square foot. That's just a fact. The reason why land use and zoning is important is that we regulate what we believe a healthy city should look like. We need some housing, we need some jobs, and we need some affordable housing. We also need these types of jobs and other types of jobs. And we also need to make sure that we're building a hotel for the tourism industry, etc. I don't believe the market will take care of all of our needs. I do believe that land use should be regulated, and should be regulated by the people. And what we are hearing over and over again from our residents is that we are losing all of our working class and middle class residents. We're losing our artists. We're losing my auto repair shop. So we are actually in many ways responding to the calls that we are hearing from San Franciscans that want the city to continue to be the place that they love.
And we have a last question for Tim. So this ties into some of the, what Jane was saying is the loss of close to 1 million square feet of PDR space in the last couple of years, and then potentially a lot more coming. One argument that proponents have made is that if we kind of wait for the Central Soma Plan and the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan to be revised, it's going to take several years, and time to act is now.
There's a housing crisis. We need housing. I'll tell you one of the things that strikes me about PropX is that, you are being asked to regulate a sector that's producing a lot of jobs, that is dynamic and changing rapidly. And it's expanded far beyond what anyone imagined in the Eastern Neighborhood Plan 10 years ago. SF May has jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago. You're being asked to regulate land use for the jobs of the next decade. What do they look like, and what will their land use needs be? What do they need? You're setting it in stone right now. This will be with a 2/3 vote. That's a very high bar. The other thing is that in spite of the loss, now this is planning department's data, in spite of the loss of PDR space as planned and envisioned by the Eastern Neighborhood Plan, the job sector is growing. This is a dynamic, growing sector of San Francisco's economy. San Francisco May, the trade association of small makers, was never consulted in how this was put together. They are desperate for solutions for the makers of the bags and the paperware, ceramics, and chocolates, because they're getting pushed out to Hayward and Fremont. They need solutions here. They do not support this because they're saying, we don't see anything that's going to be usable for us. Yes, it'll have small boutique spaces in ground floors of buildings at $5 a foot. That's not what we need. Makers rarely want to be in residential buildings. They have machinery, noise, they have loading requirements, they have all sorts of things. They want different space, but yet this measure that you're supposed to approve says, we'll give you this space. Well, even if it's not usable to them, I guess that's supposed to help them. They're not seeing the help in it.
Did you read the proposition?
Now we have time for 2 closing statements. So actually, I think it started with you, Tim, and then you go to Jane. So you get to begin.
This goes back to my paranoid fantasy about, this is really intended to stop housing production, market rate housing production. There's no balance in this between PDRs and BMRs, PDR space and below market rate units. When land is used, when land that's not very well utilized now is put back into productive use, and in a lot of these neighborhoods, this will be mixed-use development, housing above ground floor use that has community serving retail and a lot of other things, art space and a lot of these things. Both that and PDR are below market return. So whoever's supposed to build this stuff is supposed to not only do the BMRs, which is a very heavy subsidy, and it's very good. And Jane has done a lot of good work in increasing the affordability project. She deserves credit for that. But that's a below market return on it. And then to say PDR space, which these folks can't pay much, that's another thing that gets added to the pro forma, and it will make projects infeasible. You will see projects bailing out, which means they can stay parking lots, they can stay warehouses, or crappy one-story retail that has a few shops. It will not be put back into productive use because other uses will produce a better return. In other words, we're burdening the production of housing by saying you gotta pay for this, you gotta pay for this, PDR, affordable housing. Wrong response for underutilized land in a housing crisis.
And now we go to Jane.
Thank you. Tim called my measure alarmist, but I actually call your predictions of the impact of this measure alarmist. Kim said it, we are a city that has some of the highest impact fees in the country, and yet we also have the highest rate of construction in the country right now. We are building more than we've built in the Gold Rush, and we've done that with these impact fees. We've done that with higher requirements for affordable
High-end
housing.
housing, not middle income.
And we've been able to build more working class and middle income housing because of these requirements. Okay, I have never met a developer that said, I could build 500 luxury units on this parcel, but because I'm not required to do affordable housing, I'm just going to do 500 middle class housing units instead. That never happens. I'm sorry. You are always going to build to the highest level of profit that you are allowed to build for. That is your job. You have investors, and so you are always going to build the highest and best use of that land. The best use being what will make you the most in your bottom line. We must regulate developers, and we can do that and still allow them to build. I've said this before, I want developers to run their businesses in San Francisco, but I don't want them to run San Francisco. It is really important, and I take this very seriously as a representative of the people, that we ensure that land use includes our perspective. And yes, we need more housing, but we also need more space for arts organizations, artists, and manufacturers. There is no doubt about that. Ask any artist or arts organization if they feel secure in San Francisco today. 70% in our own Arts Commission survey said they have been evicted, are in the process of being evicted, or fear eviction in the very near future. That's not alarmist. That's actually based on data today. And we've seen it. We've seen the 970,000 square foot of PDR that we have lost. So I say we try out this legislation. And by the way, how we came up with the numbers, 1 for 1, 0.4 to 1, 0.25 to 1, has actually been based on a lot of planning commission decisions that we've seen on very similar types of projects. So when we see the planning commission make certain types of recommendation, we're like, okay, well let's try and make that the standard. But if it doesn't work, the Board of Supervisors can change that down the line with a 2/3 vote in the future and make sure that we make this appropriate for what it is. But really, PropX is about a balance. It's about ensuring that we have a balance of housing production, office production, but we're also producing PDR and manufacturing spaces as well. And the one thing about the rent, I agree, there is no way for us to, unfortunately, regulate commercial rent. It's part of the reason why we're losing a lot of our small businesses in our neighborhoods, arts organization, nonprofit services as well. But we do offer one thing. If you, as a market rate developer, decide, I'm going to do BMR, below market rate commercial use, I'm going to rent the PDR at 50% of what the market rate is currently, we reduce your obligation by 40%. So you don't have to build as much PDR if you are willing to self-regulate your own rent to ensure affordability. I do think this measure is incredibly important. I don't think it's alarmist. We have data to show that we are losing it, and if you don't need the data, you can see it every day on our streets. And so let's give PropX a chance. It has the support, again, of the Democratic Party, our tenants union, Sierra Club, and we hope that it has your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tim and Supervisor Kim.